Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome to Speak Up Africa, a civic engagement digital platform. My name is Nancy Mtansi Kinyanjui, and I'm your host. Now, before anything else, kindly to all our viewers, remember to follow us on our social media platforms. That is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Today's topic is about youth and election. There has been voter apathy among the youth all over East Africa. Whenever there's elections, the youth are very active when it comes to campaign rallies. But when the elections and the day to vote comes, and there's always a low turnout when it comes to youth participation. What is the problem and how do we solve this issue? Joining me in this conversation are two guests, one from Kenya and the other guest from Uganda. I would like to give this opportunity to my guest in Kenya to kindly introduce himself and also tell us what he does.
Service providers such as mechanics, think of service providers such as caterists or caterers, and also an entrepreneur in the sense of utilizing.
Just a minute. Samuel, can you see me? Daniel, can you hear me?
I can see you, Nancy. I can hear you
Oh,
now.
you can. Oh, you can hear me
Yes.
now.
Yeah.
Okay. Apologies for that. Apologies for that. Let me just begin from. Let me just start. Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to Speak Up Africa, a civic engagement digital platform. My name is Nancy Mtansi Kinyanjui, and I'm your host. Now, before anything else, kindly to all our viewers, remember to follow us on our social media pages. That is Speak Up Africa on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Today's topic is about youth and election. And there has been voter apathy when it comes to youth all over East Africa. But when they are the time to vote, there's always a low turnout when it comes to the other guest from Uganda. Kindly, my guest from Kenya, introduce yourself, tell us your names, and also what you do.
Thank you, Nancy, for that opportunity to introduce myself. My name is Samuel Kagwe. I am from Kenya. And for this conversation, I think I am well described as a youth. So I am the CEO of Hudumia Connect Limited. This is a company in Kenya that connects various service providers and service users. So you can think of service providers such as mechanics. You can think of service providers such as caterers in the market that they serve. That is what we try to connect them using various technologies. I am also an entrepreneur in the sense of utilizing innovation to solve the various challenges in our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. My guest from Uganda.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Ntende Daniel. I'm working with an organization known as Advance Africa, engaged largely with supporting young people, supporting women, children, generally vulnerable groups to be economically viable, be able to live dignified lives and be able to, let's say, meet their own needs, be able to start up businesses. I'm also a lawyer in Uganda, and yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Daniel. Now, my first question goes to you, Samuel. Considering we're having elections this year in Kenya on August 9th, and there's a latest report that was released by IEBC on 20th this month, actually, indicating that the number of registered voters has risen from 19.9 million, this was 2017, to 22.1 million. And it also says that the number of registered voters increased compared to 2017, that is. So the youth voters, there's a decline, declined by 5.27 compared to the youth voter registration in 2017. Basically, the female youth declined by 7.75%, and the male youth declined by 2.89%. These are the youth, Samuel. What is going on? Why don't the youth want to vote?
That is an excellent question, Nancy. And I think to answer it, we should not only look at voter apathy, but we should also look at something that is called political alienation. So, voter apathy is a lack of interest in voting, but that is not the problem in Kenya because historically the youth have always voted in Kenya. The problem that we have in Kenya is the political alienation of the youth, which means that the youth are boxed in such that they have to vote, but again, they feel like when they vote, they do not have any impact on the system, on the systems in Kenya. They do not have any impact on the political structure in Kenya. And therefore, they feel at the end of the day, their vote is going to be wasted. They are going to have no impact whatsoever. And again, now this draws them towards voter apathy. So that is the problem that we have. And if we are to go with the numbers that have been presented by IEBC, then it is indicative that when it comes to August, very few youth, a small portion of the youth is going to vote. The majority of the youth are not going to vote because they feel like it is not going to make any difference to the system.
Okay, what about you, Daniel? Is that the same thing that is happening in Uganda?
Yes, the trend is similar. If you look at the graphs of people that engage in voting vis-a-vis the number of people that are registered as voters, what you see is that the number of registered voters keeps on going up. let me say as of 2021, the actual number of people that were voting age were over 20 million. Of the 20 million, 18 million was registered. And at the end of the day, about 9 million ended up casting the vote. And this is generally a trend, downward spiral. Um, I can't say that there's just one thing that is the reason as to why people don't vote, but I can categorize it as in two things. One, what happens around the elections or during the election time, and two, what happens during a term that is served, that is before the elections. So you find that a lot of people have lost, let's say, trust in the system, lack of transparency. A lot of people don't feel like if I vote, will there be anything different? There are things that have created apathy, whether it is things like corruption, lack of trust, and transparency. I mean, when someone is getting campaigning, makes a lot of promises, how this will get better, how this will be changed. And then once they're elected in office, they forget about the things that they have promised and move on. You look at things like corruption, where people are engaged in massive theft of funds that are meant to support the public, whether roads or otherwise. And there's little accountability about that. So people no longer have trust in the system. People just look at it as an opportunity for quick benefits, a piece of soap, a kilogram of sugar. Not many people really have trusted the system.
I'm curious to know, you've both, all of you, talked about lack of trust in the system, and that is actually leading to the youth not vote. But I want to know what, since the youth, majority of the youth don't vote, what exactly do they do during, what is their role exactly in electoral processes, Samuel?
The youth have a lot of roles in the election. For example, if we are to go by the census statistics which were provided in 2019, they provided that 70% of Kenya's population is below the age of 35. And if 35% of that 70% is people who are below, say, 18 years old, then it indicates that the youth are the majority of the voters in any election. So therefore, the first role of the youth in an electoral process is voting. The other role that they play is facilitating the election process itself, because it's the youth who get positions such as overseeing those electoral posts and so on. Number three, the youth play the role of influencing the final decision or the final direction that the entire populace takes. And when I say that this is what I mean. The youth, for example, in Kenya, those who are jobless, they are paid very little monies to be transported to political rallies. And then this is then uh, shown to the rest of the population through various media. And this can have the impact of influencing the decision of that voter who is seated at home. When he or she sees that there is a lot of youth following a certain politician, then that person is likely to think that that is the right person to vote for. So the youth play three roles. Number one, they are the voters. Number two, they facilitate the voting. And number three, they influence the direction of the election itself.
Um, uh, Daniel, you've spoken about lack of trust in their leaders as well and the system. What should the system do? What is that one motivating factor to a reluctant youth, and that you feel like the government, the electoral bodies, the system in general should do to motivate the youth to take part in this process?
Now, there's no one magic bullet to encourage young people to be a part or to take part in elections. Um, First of all, I would think it's to deal with the issues that affect young people. And it's not just young people, but issues that affect the population, issues that are important to any citizen of the country, whether it is service delivery, medical care, things like corruption, to make sure that there is access to basic services, whether it is education and otherwise. When people have some of these things dealt with, they feel like there is value in the system. There is something again out of the system. So there is that part of holding our leaders accountable to the role they're supposed to play, to the things they're supposed to do, not just what they promise, but what is constitutionally their role in government, whether it is at parliamentary level or at the LC1 level, at the presidential level. We need to have a system that holds our leaders accountable. Two, we also need to create a level of transparency. I think a certain degree of transparency is needed. In previous court rulings by the Supreme Court, that is one thing that has been that has come up, and I feel those are things that if we address, can make more people interested in taking part. But then also we have civic engagement or civic education of some sort that can be engaging, whether it is young people or people in institutions like universities and schools, that can support and help to turn the situation and the system around. But I feel to a large extent, we need to largely work on the things that are happening in a term of office when it comes to leaders being accountable for the things that they do to help people believe that change happens.
What happens to the youth, Daniel? What happens to the youth that can't access, maybe who are living in poor conditions and can't access education? What happens? You know, you've mentioned civic engagement, civic education. I would like you maybe to get deep into it and maybe tell us some of the ways the government can use to reach out to some of these youth who are in poor conditions, and how they can
So,
use that to educate the youth on
so
matters election.
okay. So when I talk about civic engagement, I'm bringing it up as one of the things that can support, especially for the younger people, those that are already in school. But civic engagement is not only done at school or university, but can also be through whether it is radios, televisions, and through other means. But the reason why civic engagement is important, democracy is as good as the quality of citizens that you have. When the quality of citizens that you have are people that are in abject poverty, people that would give you a vote for a piece of soap and not able to consider the repercussions of that vote beyond the piece of soap and the bar and let's say a kilo of sugar, that means that even if they are able to vote, the reasons they vote would not necessarily bring in change, the kind of change that they would want. So when I talk about civic engagement, it's twofold. One, it's for young people in school, those that are already in school. Then it is because there are also a big number of the populace that is not necessarily able to access school, that is not able to access university or some of those institutions for one reason or the other. Can we get them through radio? Can we get them through television? There are also use of social media, which now has
We'll come to the social media. Thank you, Daniel. Allow me, sorry to cut you off.
no,
Samuel, tell us also what is one motivating factor, you know, to a reluctant youth. Do you think the government, electoral bodies should do to influence the youth to vote?
First, I'm going to agree with the points that Daniel has given us, and to say that there's no one factor, one singular factor that can be used to model out democracy. But secondly, I want to mention that democracy is supposed to be a means to an end. And in the past, in Kenya and in many other countries, that link between the desires of the populace and what the people in government actually do has been disconnected. And therefore, this has become a factor that demotivates the youth to take part in elections. So In my opinion, the thing that can be done, firstly, is to mend that link. And how can that link be mended? First, by making sure that the voters are aware from a very young age, from the moment they become the voters, of the different roles of the political positions. Now, it is common knowledge that the people who are vying for political positions nowadays have individualistic ambitions. And from these individualistic ambitions, they mislead the voters on their role in government, on what they can actually do. For example, in Kenya, you will find an MCA saying that he's going to build schools or he's going to, well, we know the role of an MCA is not supposed to be that. It's supposed to be oversight on the county government. It's supposed to be maybe distribution of bursaries and so on. But they're going to mislead the voters so as to convince them anything that will convince them to give them the votes. So first of all, bodies such as IEBC needs to focus on ensuring that every voter understands the different roles of the political positions. Number two, the second thing that can be done is engaging the citizens of this country from a very young age before they actually become voters, so that they have an innate understanding of how the electoral process works in Kenya. This can begin in schools from primary levels to secondary levels, and democracy can be practiced with the school leadership, with the sports leadership, and so on, such that by the time these pupils or these students become actual voters, they will have an understanding of how the electoral process works, and they will be able to make good choices because they will have the experience from their education from their schools, even though it will not be the same experience. So that is what I would say is needed at the moment.
Thank you, Samuel. Daniel, I would like you to tell me what really influences the choice of candidates in youth, because you've all spoken about, lack of trust, corruption, and things that come thereafter, after election. What would influence the youth choice of candidates?
Sorry.
Oh,
Can you please repeat the question one more time?
okay, I'm asking, you spoke about lack of trust in the leaders, you've spoken about corruption. So, majorly, these are things that come after elections. Now, my question to you, Daniel, is what would influence the youth choice of candidates?
What influences the youth choice of candidates? People are influenced by different factors. I don't think any one factor, okay, every group of people has some interest. For instance, there might be people that will vote someone based on maybe where they come from. There's a certain group that will vote someone based on what they've been given, a piece of soap, a kilo of sugar, and the like. Others vote maybe because of party affiliation. As long as his party is my party, is part of my party, I will vote that individual. There are others who vote as a result of competence. They feel he can do the job, he can deliver. And from those or from that perspective of people who vote with the opinion that this one is able to bring about some change, they will consider things like what have you done in the past? What are you promising to do? Are you able to deliver it? But I believe that for a large part of young people want basic services when it comes to access to the hospital. That when I go to the hospital, I will find a doctor, I will find drugs. They want easy access to financing for their businesses. A lot of young people are left out of that because they are not able to afford the high interest rates. They want access to whether it is government services, good roads, and the like. So I feel like, or it is my opinion that whereas a myriad of reasons why people vote or why people choose different people. But one of the most important is people need service delivery. People need to feel like their government does care about them and is doing the best within their power to ensure that uh, people are able to benefit from the resources that the government is able to benefit. Government collects quite a number of taxes and also borrows a lot of money, all of which are a burden on the population. So at the end of the day, failure to deliver on that front frustrates a lot of young people. And the reason why they will jump up behind any person, whether opposition or government, uh, is influenced by some of those issues.
Samuel, what's your opinion on that?
Um, I partly agree with what Daniel has said, but for the youth as a demographic, I think relatability is the biggest factor. You know, as I mentioned before, the youth have been alienated from the political scene. You know, we vote, but we do not have any concrete representation in the government, or we do not impact the system in any way. So, in this election that will be held in August, I strongly feel that relatability is a very big factor in terms of influencing the youth on their choice of candidates. The youth want a political candidate or a leader who's going to make them feel or that leader understands what they actually go through from day to day. This is why some of the political candidates are resorting to superficial measures such as trying or attempting to speak Sheng to try to make them relatable to the youth. But this is very superficial. As the youth, we're actually looking for a candidate who's going to demonstrate through speech and through otherwise that they actually know the experiences that we go through, that they understand the hurdles that we face when we are trying to open a new company, when we are trying to open a new business, the hurdles when we are trying to look for capital, trying to travel, and so on. So, relatability.
Thank you. Daniel, this is the reason why I actually catch you off when when you were, explaining how social media influences the youth. Because the reason I catch you because most youth, in fact, social media, youth participate when it comes to elections. Youth are the major people that are very active in social media. But now you see, when the time comes to vote, that's when we see different results. How can we use social media to influence the youth so that it's just not about noise on social media? It's actually action.
If I got you correctly, you're asking about how social media can add value to the youth rather than just being a tool, right?
Yeah, yeah, and in election period.
Yes. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to Uganda, internet penetration, according by 2020, was about 30%. That number has probably gone up, and I believe a big portion of that number are young people because they are ready to embrace these new technologies and new platforms to be a part. Um, One of the biggest things about social media is passing information. Now, someone who otherwise would not be able to be on TV, would not be able to be on radio or any other, be known any other way, has a platform. They can create a talk show, they can create a video that goes viral in seconds. The biggest role of social media, first of all, is the ability to pass around information. There's a wealth of information that is available on social media. And that is something that we can harness to ensure that as many people as possible have access, one, to the internet and to social media, but then that they also have access to the right information on internet. Not by regulating or by determining who can and cannot do this on the internet, but I believe that if the right information is passed around, it will eventually get to the people that are listening. But for me, the biggest advantage of social media for young people is that it is a platform that anyone can use. It gives equal opportunity for everyone. As long as you decide to use it and use it the right way, it can be a big factor for young people getting into whether it is the electoral process or elections. That is one tool they can harness to put out their message, to reach out, especially to young people. Yes.
Okay, Samuel, how can social media be used to influence the youth? Because we've seen in Kenya, even on Twitter, majority are the youth, always talking about different candidates, but they actually don't vote. How can we use this social media as a tool to influence the youth?
Um, I believe social media is just a medium. There's nothing that is so different about it. It's a medium like any other. Perhaps the only difference is that the political elite cannot control it as they control the mainstream media to spread propaganda or to instill some ideals and ideas into the mind of the youths. So I think social media is an important tool where we can put our leaders we can make them accountable. We can ask them questions so that they are not going to present blind manifestos. We've seen that in Kenya with some of the presidential candidates who presented their manifestos. People are asking them questions. How are you going to achieve this? You know, because in the past, the trend, the trajectory has been lying and just saying that you're going to do things that as a country, we are not even there. We don't have the capability to do it. So I believe social media is very, very useful, but again, it's just a medium. The same things that can be done offline are the same things that are being done online. So
Yeah.
the same policing that is being done offline as well. For example, with the people who push the youth towards violence with words and I don't know how to explain that the political candidates who use the youth offline to lead them towards violence, they are also doing the same on online platforms, and therefore the same amount of policing and the same amount of resources that have been directed towards preventing such violence should also be channeled towards those online platforms.
Thank you. As we wind up, I would like to know, we've spoken about youth participants as participating as voters, but I believe majority of the youth would want to go, for some of these elective positions. What form of support should the government show, and maybe how should the government support the youth who are looking forward, to run for some of the seats? Daniel.
Okay, for instance, in Uganda, the youth have their own representation. They're youth members of parliament. Uh, we say that the biggest majority of our population, over 70%, as of last year, we were the youngest nation, meaning that a big number of the people who actually vote are young people. So I don't so much believe to say that government should do this in order to have more young people in a sense of proactive action or to push people either into.
No, I'm actually asking how should the government support some of these young leaders, some of these youth
Yes,
who are vying for seats, who want to
yes,
get into politics? How should the government support some of this youth?
yes. One, we need a system that is transparent. Um, that needs to be true that at every polling station, if I have a representative, they are not going to be harassed, they are not going to be arrested, they will not disappear, nothing will happen to them in support of another candidate. The fear of violence, a lot of people have a lot of fear around violence around elections. That shouldn't happen. Violence around election time shouldn't take place and should not be perpetrated in any way. To raise the confidence of whoever is engaging in elections. especially the young people. But a level ground, a transparent system is something that would go a long way in assuring people that even when I take place or when I take part in an election, I am not worried about my life. I'm not worried about what could happen to me. But the other thing is also money. There's a lot of money that goes around during elections. Uh, People buying off voters, and that puts those that don't have those finances at a disadvantage. And a big number of those are young people. So the government needs to deal with issues around election financing. How do people get their funds to help them be elected? And how are those funds utilized? We need to make sure people are not being bought off through money, because then that puts younger people at a disadvantage. Yes.
Samuel, what's your opinion on that? How should the government support youth leaders?
Um, Given that a government changes every 5 to 10 years in Kenya, I believe that should not be the responsibility of the government, but rather government institutions, if I'm making sense. When we have strong government institutions, then we can be able to institute the transparency that Daniel is talking about. Because in Kenya, I can say for a fact that campaign funding is one of the biggest problems. Because if the guys who are not part of the youth demographic can access some funding that is from corrupt sources that the youth do not have access to, then they go ahead and use that to bribe voters to vote for them. Then it locks the youth out of that equation, and they are not going to have any impact in the political process or in the government itself. So there's some statistic that says that despite the fact that the youth compose the majority of the population in Kenya, they are actually the minority when it comes to the formal institutions in the country. So we should also have more youth in leadership positions in institutions such as even the IBC itself. We can see there the chairman of IBC is very old, and the other guys who are there are also very old. So if we have no
Okay.
inclusion in the institution that is in charge of the elections itself, how can we have any hope that we are going to be impactful in the political process at all? So number one, transparency, which Daniel has talked about, especially to do with campaign funding. That one should be dealt with, because again, you find that the people who fund the campaigns are the ones who call the shots once those guys get into government, and most of them are some old guys who've acquired money over 50 years, so the youth cannot compete with that. But if the ground is equal for everyone, then even I can have a chance to become the governor of Nairobi someday.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Samuel and Daniel. We've unfortunately come to the end of this discussion. And I believe what we have talked about will be taken into consideration by the government, or even one way or another impact the youth to take part in this process, because in elections, because I believe the youth have the power. They can make a very powerful political force, and they have the power to decide on how a country should be ran, other than, complaining on different issues affecting them. To our viewers, thank you very much. And we are going to post this video on our social media pages. Like I'd mentioned before, remember to follow us on our social media pages: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. That is Speak Up Africa. My name is Nancy, and I'm your host. Bye.